publication called Seacoast Online, there's an example of a cliche where it says the phrase concerned residents. A cliche is an overused, worn out phrase in reporting that is usually used in transitions. I would fix this specific cliche by using a quote from a resident in the story that express their direct feelings. A story in the Denver Post discusses firefighters' attempts to stop a wildfire. One section says, by 8:30 p.m., they were at 90 containment. Evacuations were called off at 9:20 p.m. This doesn't clarify what 90 containment means in regards to the story, whether it was 90% or another variable. It then goes on to say temperatures, which dipped to the low 20s overnight, helped firefighters maintain 90% containment. Even though it tells us that it's a percentage, this doesn't tell us what the 90% is or what it means in the story. To correct this, I would publish an edit clarifying what 90% containment of this wildfire is, how much land it covered, and why this number is significant. In this article, which is featured in the Chicago Tribune, a sentence reads, the trial of a woman accused of handing a loaded pistol to her teenage niece moments before 14-year-old Endia Martin was fatally shot was abruptly postponed Monday after her attorneys said they needed time to explore a late-arriving ballistics report. I think that the main noun, the trial, is too far from the main verb, postponed. There is too much information in between these two words, and the sentence is confusing to read. For a correction, I would write it as, a woman accused of handing a loaded pistol to her teenage niece moments before 14-year-old Endia Martin was fatally shot is on trial. However, the trial was abruptly postponed Monday after her attorneys said they needed time to explore a late-arriving ballistics report. Passive voice is when the subject of the sentence is acted upon by the verb. Generally speaking, it is good practice to always use active voice in writing or sentences where the subject performs the action stated by the verb. In an article in Pitchfork magazine, there is a sentence that reads, it was written by Barrett in 1965 before being recorded in 1967. The subject of the sentence, Barrett, is acted upon by the verb was written. To correct this, I would write the sentence as, Barrett wrote it in 1965 before it was recorded in 1967. This way, the subject, Barrett, performs the action stated by the verb, was written. An article on Politico.com features an excellent example of parallelism. The sentence says, the GOP would have a menu of options to take on Hillary Clinton in 2020. The hard-edged conservatism of Ted Cruz, the lofty oratory of Marco Rubio, the earnest wonkery of Paul Ryan, or the brawny national security vision of Tom Cotton. Each of the parts of this list are introduced with an interesting adjective describing a noun, and they all follow the same format. In a news brief on Oxygen.com, there is an example of a stereotypical reference. The story's lead reads, sexism sucks, and not just for women. The statement implies that women are the only ones who suffer from sexism. Although the article itself is proving the sentence to be false, by saying this, it's immediately discrediting any other individual's plight with sexism who isn't a woman. Because today's culture identifies more than two genders, it isn't fair in a news brief to say that women are the only ones who suffer sexism. Also, if we are going to be technical, it might be true that some women enjoy sexism, and by saying it quote-unquote sucks for women would be incorrect. To correct this, I would say sexism affects men too, according to a study. This way, you're implying that the article is about to talk about how sexism affects men, rather than singling out women as the only victims of sexism. In an article published by the Ottawa Courier, the word regalia is used in this sentence. This word actually means the emblems or insignia of royalty, especially the crown, scepter, and other ornaments used at coronation. Because they're referring to a pilgrim in this reference and describing her dress, apron, and bonnet, this is an incorrect use of the word. To fix this, I would replace the word with attire, which is a more general way to describe clothing, especially the kinds that are being listed. The publication in the East Valley Tribune, there's a story published with the headline, Tiny Homes Pack Amenities into Small, Lower-Cost Options. The story has no timely aspect to it. It only discusses the phenomenon of tiny homes in the area. problem with this is that it's placed under the news section, but it's not a news story. To correct this, I would find an angle of the story that could give this article relevance. In an article in the Anniston Star, there's an example of a punctuation error in the very first paragraph. A punctuation error occurs when a punctuation mark is used in the wrong context, is added when unnecessary, or is omitted entirely. The sentence reads, firefighters in Calhoun County only had to snuff out 2 small brush fires Saturday despite the dry weather, but meteorologists warn the drought will intensify this week. I believe that there should be a comma placed in between weather and but, so it breaks up the sentence and is easier for readers to understand. In an article in the San Diego Union Tribune, there is an example of dead construction. The sentence reads, there seems to be no, as genius Johnny Mercer wrote, Mr. In-Between. Dead constructions are sentences that are often in passive voice and have no specific subject. Without the previous sentence, this one would only confuse readers. To correct it, I added the sentence before and wrote, McCoy is either a terrible head coach or a miracle worker, and as genius Johnny Mercer wrote, there does not seem to be a Mr. In-Between. A sentence written in an article in the News Gazette reads, going forward, she said, when hospital staff is wearing protective personal equipment when taking care of patients in isolation, so will visitors, she said. First of all, the writer says she said twice in this sentence, and one of these can be omitted. Secondly, this is an example of lack of subject-verb agreement. The word staff is a collective noun and can often be used as a singular group, one that acts together. In this case, you would write the staff is. However, a staff doesn't always act together, and when that is implied in a sentence, the correct way to write the sentence would be the staff are. In this example, there is a when in front of staff, meaning the staff isn't always wearing protective gear, and they aren't always taking care of patients in isolation. This means that the staff is likely not acting as a single unit in this instance, thus the correct verb for this subject would be are. Also, because the article says that the staff will always wear protective equipment when dealing with patients in isolation, the sentence should say the word and in the place of the word when, between the words equipment and taking. Additionally, I would change the final phrase to read, visitors will also, to clarify to the reader that it's not starting a new idea with so. Thus, the final sentence would read, going forward, when hospital staff are wearing protective equipment and taking care of patients in isolation, visitors will also, she said. The article featured here is from the Chicago Tribune, and the highlighted section is something I believe is very wordy. Wordiness occurs when there's too much information in a sentence without punctuation to break it up for the reader. I think that the part of this sentence after the part that says, took the stand, is way too wordy for the sentence. My correction for the sentence would be, Alicia Stevenson's lawyer says that she had access to 4 private jets during her marriage. The man who owned the company that cared for those private jets took the stand on Thursday. In an article in the News Gazette, there's a fact error where it lists the name of a person named Ben. One reference to his name says that his last name is spelled Reedier, while the other says it's spelled Rediger. A fact error is an inaccurate piece of information in a story. Since there's no other reference to a source named Ben, one of the spellings of his name is incorrect. To correct this, I would contact the source and ask for a correct spelling of his name. I chose to show an example of a sentence fragment in a story for a wildcard option. In an article on Forbes, a section reads, that wasn't the craft cocktails talking, but they certainly add to the appeal. So do the plates from hotshot chef Andrew Carmelini. This fragment has no main verb. I corrected it to say, the small plates from hotshot chef Andrew Carmelini also added to the appeal. For my second wildcard option, I found an example of sentence sprawl or a run-on sentence. While there aren't any grammatical errors in the sentence, it's very lengthy and could be rewritten to be more easily understood. Sentence sprawl occurs when a writer adds a lot of information in a sentence without breaking it up with punctuation. To correct it, I would write, everyone will have to come together to develop a strategy on debt relief for the school district for immediate and long-term needs, Melton said after Tuesday night's referendum vote.